Magnificat anima mea Dominum. My soul magnifies the Lord. From the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 1, verse 47. Welcome back to the Magnification Podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Jacobson. To get into our topic today, there are numerous issues that affect people with disabilities, and these impact their lives in various ways. They range from communication to inclusion. Some issues are more obvious, while others are less noticeable and of a sensitive nature. Toward the end of this video, I will note some issues that seem to be underrepresented in the disability world, particularly from a Catholic perspective. Some initial observations on this topic that I gathered from people I know are: first, not all disabilities are visible. Some people are disabled even though they look like a typical person. Second, people with disabilities appreciate when others talk to them directly as people instead of through others because it accords with their dignity. There can be situations where people naturally talk to the persons assisting people with disabilities because they are not sure of their cognitive abilities. It is a good practice, however, to talk directly to the person with a disability, and then, if the person needs help communicating, their family member or aide will step in to facilitate communication. These observations are valuable to remember because everyone has immense dignity, being creations of God, regardless of physical or intellectual limitations. Furthermore, disabilities are a result of a breakdown of our bodies, which is a result of sin. However, this does not mean that people with disabilities or their parents are worse sinners than others. Jesus references this fact in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 9, verses 1 to 3. The RSVCE Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition states, "As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?' Jesus answered, 'It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him.'" End quote. In this, Jesus and St. John the Evangelist are correcting the errors of their society regarding disabilities and their correlation to sin. They also give us an insight into the real use that God has for people with disabilities. Even though God does not directly will our bodies to be broken or to function improperly, He still works within the reality created by sin to bring a greater good out of situations. Therefore, disabilities can be used by God to help people practice charity or sacrificial love toward the individual they are assisting. This can help them grow in the virtue, and thus they can become more holy day by day if they are open to doing their duties for the glory of God and the good of the individual. Additionally, when people with disabilities allow themselves to be helped by others, they are practicing charity toward them as well. This is an interesting insight that I did not know of until my spiritual director mentioned it to me. So, in the end, people's assistance helps both the individual being aided and the person helping at the same time. This is so that the works of God might be made manifest End quote. John 9:3. I am now going to speak on various realities within society that concern people with disabilities. I will be referencing Minnesota particularly. Depending on a person's state or country of residence, some or all of the programs will be different than those described here. Some situations, financially speaking, concerning with people with disabilities that people may not be aware of are: someone on disability-based medical assistance has an asset limit of $3,000 that they can have in their possession at any time. However, if the person qualifies for supplemental security income and receives it, or is on the 1619A or 1619B program through Social Security, the asset limit is different. This limit can only be as high as the one for SSI in general, which is only $2,000. Both of these limits are very low, but $2,000 is even more restrictive. Another financial program is an ABLE, Achieving Better Life Experience account, which allows you to save up to $19,000 unemployed, $34,060 if you are employed, with $15,060 being from your own income. However, with the ABLE plan, your money automatically has to be invested in an investment option, so you cannot just save money like a normal savings account. Even though you can invest conservatively, it is my opinion that you should not have to invest money that you are saving for your future benefit just because you are using an account directed toward people with disabilities. If other people do not have to invest their savings, we should not have to either. Also, the ABLE account is only supposed to be used for qualified disability-related expenses, such as housing, health, transportation, and assistive technology, among other things, according to Minnesota Disability 101, DB 101. If you use the money for non-qualified expenses, you are subject to income taxes based on your tax bracket and a 10% federal tax penalty, and possibly other things. I feel that this is very disadvantageous to people with disabilities because it limits what they can use their saved money on, so that their disability becomes a point of hindrance. This is because people cannot use their saved money for what they desire. Another option for people to work and still save money while keeping their medical assistance benefits in Minnesota is MAEPD, Medical Assistance for Employed Persons with Disabilities program. According to the DB 101 article on MAEPD, a positive aspect of this program is that there are no income or asset limits. As of January 1st, 2024, to be eligible, a person must be determined disabled through the Social Security Administration or the State Medical Review Team, SMRT board. In addition, they must have made more than $65 of income per month over a 6-month period as an average, and have had Medicare and Social Security taxes withheld or have paid these themselves. People also have to pay a premium in order to receive medical coverage. These are based on one's income with no maximum cap. DB101 also explains that there are other ways to get insurance coverage, either through Minnesota Care, MNsure, or employer health care coverage. Depending on cost effectiveness, the county will sometimes pay a person's portion of their premiums for the employer's health care plan. There is also the 1619P program through Social Security Administration. This program lets you keep your medical assistance if your SSI, supplemental security income, goes to $0 and you have had eligibility for SSI for a minimum of 1 month and your MA coverage at least began the month before your SSI went to 0. There are also many programs in Minnesota to help people with disabilities find work. Some such programs are the Vocational Rehabilitation Services through the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED, workforce centers, or the Ticket to Work program. With both the vocational rehab and Ticket to Work programs, someone with a disability can get help with applying for jobs, getting assistive technology needed for their employment, and getting support while starting a new job. This includes help with any work accommodations they may need. These several housing options for people with disabilities who are not living in their family home or an assisted living facility or a nursing facility in Minnesota are as follows: group homes, living with a roommate or several who have disabilities in a communal house, or living in your own apartment. One can also receive services in all these living arrangements. Some of these housing options are subsidized by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. According to their 2020 guide, tenants are required to pay, quote, 10% of their gross income or 30% of their adjusted income, end quote, for rent. Some rent may also be paid for by another agency called the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, MHFA. Additionally, some or all utilities may be covered depending on the living situation. There is also a program called Caregiver Living Expenses, which can be utilized through several MA waiver programs. This program pays a portion of a non-relative's rent or food if they live with a person who has a disability and serve as their worker in a service that is covered by an MA waiver. There are also many waiver programs through medical assistance that provide additional services to individuals with qualifying needs related to a disability within Minnesota. These services can be quite extensive. For example, I am on the CADI Community Access for Disability Inclusion waiver and utilize many services including PCA Choice, soon to be called CFSS, Community First Services and Supports, individualized home supports without training, respite care, day support services through my therapeutic program twice a week, a transportation service to this program, home delivered meals, funding for a ramp in a handicap accessible van, case management services, and an assistive technology assessment and coverage for items. I also have a ceiling lift that is covered, as well as maintenance for that lift. These services help me to maintain an active lifestyle at home and in the community, while taking into account the needs due to my disability. All the information provided in the explanation of programs comes either from the Disability 101 website on its Minnesota page, mn.gov, the HUD website, or Housing Benefits 101 on the Minnesota page. In regards to incorporating people with disabilities into the church community, I believe that the Catholic Church needs to look into this more deeply. Some Protestant churches have specific services geared toward people with disabilities, which can provide for inclusion. However, in the Catholic Church, this is not as feasible because the Mass must have its essential elements of the Liturgy of the Word and Eucharist, with the focal point being the consecration. These things cannot be altered based on individual or community circumstances. However, this does not mean that the Church cannot evangelize, catechize, and support people with disabilities according to their capabilities and needs. In fact, Pope Francis stated, all liturgical celebrations in the parish should be accessible to them so that, together with their brothers and sisters, each of them can deepen, celebrate, and live their faith. Regarding catechesis, he also noted that they, quote, should be welcomed and included in programs of catechesis in preparation for those sacraments. He said, adding, no one should be excluded from the grace of these sacraments, end quote. This is especially referencing the initial sacraments of baptism, First Holy Communion, and confirmation. Proper catechesis is especially important because people with disabilities are obliged to observe the commandments that God says everyone must follow. This is the case because people with disabilities are completely human like everyone else. To enunciate this fact more, I desire to explain the realities that I see are not emphasized enough regarding the sexuality of those with disabilities. This is so that people with no disabilities, and particularly those who work with them, understand these truths. The first is that I believe there needs to be more recognition that people with disabilities have a sexuality, just like non-disabled individuals. This is true regardless of a person's mental capacity. Just like I spoke about in my first episode, people with disabilities have sexual desires and impulses. It becomes more difficult for a person who has all of their cognitive abilities because they then have to deal with these things in a healthy way. If this does not occur, a series of damaging behaviors can happen, as I spoke about happened to myself previously. This brings me to my other point. All the articles and videos I looked up on the subject of sexuality and people with disabilities had the mindset of the main culture nowadays, which may be termed anything goes. I did not see a single video advocating the Catholic position on sexuality through the lens of a person with a physical disability. The Catholic position regarding this is that people with disabilities are subject to the same moral commandments as those without disabilities. These commandments are set up to lead us to happiness or holiness, as I learned in my study of moral theology. Therefore, it follows that God gave us these commandments not just as a rule, but as specific parameters or ways to ensure happiness, because through them we will be united to Him, in which happiness consists. Those who strive to maintain a relationship with God by keeping His commandments on sexuality will need to unite their sufferings caused by their biological processes to Jesus' suffering on the cross through prayer. This is especially true if they cannot exercise to release their hormones as an able-bodied person could. By praying and offering their sufferings through God's grace, they will be able to remain in it and develop a deep, strong, and fruitful relationship with Him. Additionally, they will be able to help bring about a greater good in the world, such as the conversion of sinners, which is worth everything. This topic of giving one's sufferings to God for His salvific purposes is called redemptive suffering. This concept is very important in Catholicism, and I will talk about it at greater length in a future episode. Everything I have said in this section either comes from my schooling, what I have learned from my spiritual director, or personal experience. We have covered a lot of ground in this episode, and I pray that this has given you food for thought. I know this was a lot of information, as I even had to split it up into 2 videos. You can find links to the resources I mentioned in the description below. The main point I desire people to understand from this episode is that people with disabilities are unique and created by God for a specific purpose. To help them accomplish this purpose, there are many programs in Minnesota to assist people in their various needs. Regarding the discussion on the topics of disability in relation to the church and sexuality, hopefully insight was gained, as I feel these are the least referenced in conversations relating to people with disabilities. I hope and pray you will continue the journey with me as we continue to magnify the Lord and discover His purposes through the Blessed Virgin Mary. Also, a friend of mine named Patrick wanted to ask for prayers from everyone watching this video as he is going through various anxiety issues. So I just would appreciate prayers for that. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all abundantly through the Blessed Virgin Mary and Saint Joseph. Happy Lent as well.